focus.
It is now. I don't know how much of this I'm going to use, but...
Okay, whatever. We could just have it stored just for our personal memories.
The last recording I did, I was talking about how I'm like, it's been weeks and I still haven't done shit with this, this. I can't bring myself to get rid of this box. It's a perfectly good box for cats.
Fair point.
They don't need another cat tree. I can just build a tree of boxes.
True.
Very true. I won't.
Oh, look, there's more tracks for you to play in.
Wait, no, they can't play in that.
See, I don't own cats. I don't know this stuff. I own dogs.
They're like pandas. No, they're not. They're nothing like pandas. They're like raccoons. I got my black and white animals confused.
Why gotta be black and white?
I'm not God.
Focus. Focus, bitch.
Pregnant.
Yeah, and the whole entire it was a very, very quick turnaround, because the whole entire thing when I was thinking about your birthday is like, okay, we're gonna bring some wine, maybe we'll go to the bar, whatnot. And when I had my appointment on Friday morning for my ultrasound to check my egg growth, they were just like, oh, you got some really big ones here. Yeah, we need you back in here tomorrow morning. And I was like, that's soon.
Yeah,
that's soon.
So the initial plan for my birthday was we were going to go to a comedy show at the Criterion.
Yes.
We were going to see Ali Sadiq, which you have not seen. I saw him at the Bricktown Comedy Club, and he was amazing. But seeing him at the Bricktown Comedy Club is kind of rough, because he's a comedian that likes to sit. And so as soon as the people in front of me sat down, I couldn't see him. I didn't see him for the rest of the night. But he was funny. So I was like, seeing him at the Criterion, now he's on a much higher stage. I'll definitely be able to see him. And then I was like, maybe afterward we'll go to 23rd Street and do some karaoke or go dancing at Ponyboy or whatever. And then you were like, oh no, I have an appointment. And I'm like, let's just stay in.
I didn't mean to be a downer on your birthday.
You were not a downer. I was like, this is perfect. Let's just stay in.
And we got some things done.
I honestly, I had a very old person moment when I was like, this is perfect. I'm going to put her to work. Because I have that like executive dysfunction and that like ADD paralysis where it's like there's so much that needs to get done, so nothing's going to get done. And even last night, like I was so scatterbrained because I was like, what are we going to put over there? This? No, let's put this over there. Maybe that would look better over there. I'm going to put the whatever this is called, bookshelf right here. And that's the only thing that didn't change. Everything else, it was like, I'm going to put the piano over there. Nope, over here. Nope, over there. Nope, over here. Nope, going to put it in my mouth. So, yeah, but this is what we've got so far. So now you're not just looking at a blank wall behind me with a bunch of shit on the ground. Because you saw everything was just gathered.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh no, what if my cats get angry and take it out on my stuff?
Mm.
Yeah. So.
And I mean, with the way it's decorated, it is seriously the epitome of Jenn.
It really is. And this is just the start. There are still so many boxes to be unboxed full of, hey, I could turn that into a video. It's like, here's an unboxing of stuff that I already own. Isn't this fun? Here's a book from college. Here's a Prince book. Here's another Prince book. Here's a book about Carrie Brownstein. Here's a book about Ani DeFranco I haven't read yet. There you go. Video's done. Here's a Stephen King book I haven't read yet. Here's another Stephen King book I haven't read yet because I'm illiterate. But I keep buying books because I want people to think I'm smart. Are you convinced? Me neither.
You are very smart. You do not give yourself enough credit.
I'm a smart ass.
That too, but no, you are very, very smart. You just don't give yourself enough credit because there are things I know that you have accomplished that I wish that I could accomplish.
Like academically?
Well, academically, and I feel like, I'm also jealous, and I know it's not necessarily a book thing, but I'm jealous like of your street smarts because I'm not the most street smart, not gonna lie. I'm a naive person.
That's true. But street smarts is a representation of one's upbringing more than anything. Maybe. I don't know. Because some people are like, you either have street smarts or you have book smarts. And my book smarts is very limited. My book smarts is only to things that interest me. So, like, math didn't interest me, so that went out the wall. Went out the wall? Went out...
To the window, to the wall.
To the wall. Yeah, so I don't know about math, but I've absorbed a lot of other people's life lessons, which is maybe why my street smarts is so excelled. Also, does street smarts directly correlate to logic?
I believe so.
And common sense?
I believe so.
Yeah. So that's what I have. What I don't have, what I can't do with books because I'm illiterate. I more than well make up. That up.
Please hold while she has an aneurysm.
Yeah, I think they get the gist. You know what I'm trying to say. That's all that really matters.
But even though you kid around and you say things like you're illiterate and stuff, I think you are very, very smart and that you do not give yourself enough credit.
Aw, thanks. See, isn't she a good mom? You're such a good mom.
Well, you are a wonderful sister and a great best friend, and I am so glad. I am so blessed to have you in my life, honestly.
For a minute, I was like, oh, fuck, I miss Rachel. And I'm like, I wonder if I text her, we can have lunch. And then I'm like, nah, it's 4:15. She's probably working through lunch. But I'll have those moments where I'm like, I really want Sonic, and I really want to eat it with Rachel.
Well, if you ever have those days, yes, it's 4:15 and it's a little bit busy, but, you could totally message me, and especially if we meet at that Sonic that's right by the office, hell yeah. Hell yeah, I would love to have lunch with you, because I do.
I got spoiled seeing you nearly every day.
I know, and I got spoiled seeing you too. Like, I love having lunch with my husband every day. I must say, I love having lunch with my husband every day, but it's not the same without you there.
Well, and something that you should start doing is, because we would only ever go to Sonic on days when Darren couldn't get away from his desk.
True.
So if you have a day where you can't have lunch with him,
which is starting to be frequent with it being 4:15.
But you are able to get away for lunch, call me. Be like, okay, hey, do you want to do some lunch today? And I'll be like, yes! Yes, I do! I read a Forbes magazine article that they said the job market is so goddamn atrocious right now. And because my layoff was part of the expansive tech layoff that the whole country is feeling right now, they said unemployment is expected for a minimum of 5 months.
Oh no,
yeah.
Honey.
So that means that I statistically I could be unemployed until March.
Oh, I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, same, because I'm gonna run out of money. Yeah. So I am looking at temporary shit to get me through.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's rough right now, man. It really is.
I believe it.
Yeah. Like, and because it's not just me, it's the whole goddamn country. And
It is.
like, evidently a lot of people are like waiting to see if there's going to be a recession before they do anything, and I'm like, but people who are like insanely more qualified than me, people who are like certified with shit, they're having trouble finding jobs even. So it's not like, oh, maybe you're asking for too much money, or, you know, maybe you are overqualified for a lot of these openings. It's like, and even the Forbes article also mentioned, like, a big hindrance is all of these goddamn ghost jobs, these ghost postings.
Mm-hmm. Tell me more about that. I haven't really heard so much about the ghost postings. Elaborate on that.
So you will, for instance, you go to any job board, Indeed, even LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
ZipRecruiter, anything, and you'll see. So if I do a basic search of like, this salary, full-time, in Oklahoma City or remote, it'll be like, there's 2,000 openings that meet that criteria. 35 of them are fake job postings. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, about 35% of like your at minimum
That's huge.
are fake job postings. And the reason why companies are putting out these fake job postings is so that they can gauge and graph and poll, like, oh, so if we have a job posting for 60,000, how many people are going to apply for that? Now, if we put the same job at 80,000 on a different website, how many people are going to apply for that? So they're doing it for market research.
Oh, wow.
And meanwhile, it is detrimental to considering how many people are unemployed right now.
Right.
Because anytime I submit, and I'm not the only one doing this, anytime I submit an application, I'm basically re-editing my resume.
Yeah.
And then
that's time consuming.
It takes, like, it can take upwards of 20 minutes to submit an application because you're putting in all your information. Sometimes it'll ask particular questions.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll ask for references. Sometimes it'll like ask for all of this different shit. And then you'll get that, thanks for submitting this. And then, so all of the ones where I haven't received anything, like if I received a rejection, I'm going to assume that was a real job posting and somebody else actually got it. But if I received nothing, if it was radio silence from the get-go,
Left on red,
that was probably a job posting. I went through my email just to like sort things out, and I was able to see how many of those thank you for submitting an application emails. You'll never guess how many.
Oh, I'm even afraid.
Just guess. Just throw out a number, any number.
15.
80. 80. I've submitted 80 applications.
Oh my gosh.
I've submitted 80 applications. Now guess how many I've gotten back that either say, we're interested, we would like a phone interview, or thank you for your interest, but we've decided to go with another candidate. So out of those 80, guess how many I've gotten back in responses?
5 or 6?
12. Which means everything else I was applying for, likely they were ghost jobs.
That's not right.
Yeah.
That is not right.
Yeah, it's not. Those are real numbers. That's not just like, probably 80. Or, probably 12. No, I was able to count them out. I sat there and I counted them out. And that's from the last week of August.
Oh my god.
So that's in just a little over 3 months. Just a little over 3 months. I've submitted 80 applications. Now, granted, my resume has changed a lot in those 3 months. So I could definitely understand why I was getting rejections at the start. But if I got absolutely nothing, I have to believe it's a ghost job.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where you know, This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a hard reality. So sorry to kind of bring down the energy.
Well, I mean, it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it sucks. And even with like, because they always say that, like a reference, like using your references, using people as a reference is the easiest way to get you hired.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, it's been like, oh yeah, we're not hiring until January, or we're not hiring right now, or we're not hiring until whatever. You know, this is the worst it's ever been for me. This is almost worse than during the pandemic. Like that's how bad our economy is right now. That's how bad the job market is right now. How high unemployment is right now. You can compare it to when there was a worldwide pandemic.
It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Absolutely ridiculous.
So, hold on to that gig. But if it makes you unhappy, you know, it's just a job.
Yeah.
And also, still better than teaching.
True.
Yeah,
True
you haven't
story.
even talked about that. She used to be a teacher.
I think that's something that maybe I will definitely have to come back for another episode, because that is something that I could go on for a long time.
And you should. I would love, since we are in Oklahoma and now the whole country knows, thanks to the state superintendent and his gimmicky bullshit, the whole country is now aware of just how backwards the education system is in Oklahoma, and that we are 48th in education.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. We're, 48th or 49th.
Yeah. And she was willingly going into these rundown buildings to teach your raggedy ass kids. I shouldn't say that, but oh well, damage is done. She was one of them. Look at her. Look at. Would you look at this gorgeous face? This beautiful, sensitive, caring, affectionate, and well-educated person was teaching your children. And now what do they got? People who never went to college, and people who
well, I mean, you have,
I don't know.
You have people that, you know, and God bless them for being willing to take the positions, you know, but you have people out there that are emergency certified, you know, and sometimes those are absolutely necessary, but you have people that don't have a degree in any kind of education related field
And have no way of, they have no idea how to deal with children.
Yeah. And they're,
imagine if I was teaching your children. America, you don't want that.
you see things on Facebook all the time, or at least I do. Maybe it's because I'm part of a bunch of like teacher groups and things like that. You know, I go on like Teacher Talk or whatnot, and they say, you know, if I feel like whenever you're growing up or even in your young adulthood, they say you should have one of every kind of job. Like you should always have at least one job, like maybe as a waitress or a server of some point. You should have a job as in retail, you know, just so that way you have these experiences.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
I think in that list, I think you should include substitute teaching, because is substitute teaching the equivalent of teaching? No, not really. But let me tell you, if you were to take what they call like a long-term sub job, like for somebody that went on maternity leave or something, and you're having to basically be the teacher, you know, for long periods of time, and it doesn't even have to be so long. Like maternity leaves can be up to 3 months, you know, or however many weeks. There are some people that are out for like a week, maybe a week and a half, you know, because they have a surgery or something like that, you know, and yeah, they could have a different sub every day, but that's really chaotic for the students. And so they try to have the same person so that way there's at least some consistency, But if you go in and you take some of those sub jobs, obviously you're going to have to do some teaching, especially if you're in, like an elementary situation. You can't have those elementary kids, those first or second graders, just doing the same 1+1,
just doing the same worksheets and watching the same movies
for a whole week.
I think that more people who are willing to take that on should, like, let's make them aware that's an opportunity. Like, if you enjoy kids, if you enjoy teaching, but you don't necessarily want to go to school for it, or you don't want to make a full career of it, consider being a long-term sub. I'm otherwise going to have to wholeheartedly disagree with your statement earlier of, everybody should have like some kind of a service job. Everybody should have some kind of a retail job. Everybody should have some kind of a teaching job. No.
Well, I mean, not necessarily teaching, but just getting the sub experience.
No. Rachel, look me in my oculus sockets. Would you sincerely recommend me to a public school to mold the mind of children for even a day, let alone 3 months?
I would say that depends. I mean,
that depends means no. I love you, but no. Because this is what would go down. Give me a grade.
Let's just say second.
Okay, give me a lesson. Just any standard lesson you've done.
Author's purpose.
I don't even know what that means. What is author's purpose?
So, author's purpose is, it's a brand, and again, I guess this is going to have to be a whole new episode.
Then let's skip it. Give me a new lesson. You're like, Jen, I need you to go into the second grade class, I need you to do this lesson.
I mean, just a new episode in general, just talking about this whole teaching thing.
No, I know, and it will, but I just need to, I'm trying to paint a picture here, and right now you're giving me the worst makeup brushes. Okay, I want to paint a picture on your face.
Let's do some, I know you're
Jen,
not a math person.
I need you to go into this second grade class, and I need you to teach this lesson.
2-digit and 2-digit addition.
Okay, so I would probably start out pretty good. Like, okay, what's 11 plus 11? Anybody? 22. Yeah. All right, let's do it. How'd you figure that out? 1 and 1, 2, 1 and 1, 2, carry it down. Great, we love that. Okay, what's 17 and 24? Anybody? Okay, we got 7 and 4. I think that's 12. So we're going to put a 2 down here. And then we're going to put a 1 over here. And I already forgot the numbers. So I'm just going to guess. And we're going to say 44. And if that's right, cool. All right, let's go a little harder. 99 and 17. 104? Probably. Yeah, that's good enough. Whatever. It doesn't have to be perfect because you're always going to have a calculator in your back pocket. Okay? My teacher said you're going to need to know how to do this in your head because you're never going to have a calculator in your back pocket. And guess what? We all have calculators in our back pockets. Okay? So,
but we don't want to become dependent on them.
Right. But you know what? You also have your fingers. So if you got to count it out loud, whatever. And if you're expecting me to do the whole circle thing, not happening. Who wants to come up here and solve something because my brain hurts? You don't want that in your classroom.
True. But, like, right? And I do agree. I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from. But I feel like especially people that are in these big decision-making positions, like political people, the people that we have in our capital, and making these huge government decisions and everything.
I agree. I think they need that exposure for empathy training alone.
Yeah, exactly. It's there. You have some people out there that are saying like, oh, we need to do this in the classroom, and they've never been inside of a classroom a day in their life except for to maybe obviously when they were growing up with their school experience, however their school experience was as children, and maybe possibly dropping their children off to a day at school, but they've never been in the classroom having to, go through that instructional.
Right. Well, and that's not just an issue with education and politics. That's an issue everywhere. That's an issue of power, where people in power promote other people to be in power who are not qualified. Because think about like the job that I was in,
mm-hmm.
and one of the struggles I was having. They were making all these changes. And all these changes were coming down from somebody who had never done my job. So they had no idea what the decisions they were making, how they were affecting us. And absolutely. It's why their best people left.
Yep.
And why I wanted to leave. But instead I got caught up in a massive layoff.
Yeah.
It's like upwards of like 500 people I last heard.
Yeah, it's been major layoffs.
I'm sure it's growing. I'm sure it's continuing to grow, but neither here nor there. But it's when you have somebody in a position of power making decisions about a job they know nothing about. They're just looking at statistics. Well, statistically, we want you to teach the Bible in school. We want this to be the only history book.
Coming from a former teacher who I am of the Christian faith.
Also, a Bible that has the American Constitution and the American Bill of Rights and the American, Declaration of Independence. I'm like, y'all know the Bible don't take place in America, right? Like, America did not exist during biblical times. Also, Jesus ain't white, because there ain't no white people in the Bible. Hair of wool and same texture, skin of copper.
That's not copper.
That ain't a white man. Ain't no white people, ain't no Americans in the Bible. So why the hell would you A, call the Bible a history book, and 2, add American historical documents in the Bible? Because you're psychotic. That's why.
I definitely, like I said, coming from somebody that I was born and raised in the Christian faith, in the church and everything, and I'm sorry, but there is a reason why they had separation of church and state. You got to think about all these forefathers, that they made a lot of their decisions, based on their faith. Even there's references to faith, I'm pretty sure, in the Declaration of Independence and so on and so forth. But it was also them that said separation of church and state.
Right, because as a American politician, this is opinion more than anything, your number one job is to protect American citizens.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So that means with no religious bias at all. Also, was our country not found based on religious freedom? Did them white not get on a boat and come all the way to, where is Plymouth, Massachusetts? Not come all the way over here because they were like, the Church of England is unfair, and so we want our own religion, and so we're going to come over here, and there's people. And then a whole lot of other shit went down, and white people are terrible, essentially. But was the country not partially founded on the basis of religious freedom?
It was. That was one of the main purposes, besides, doing things like explorations. They're like, we're gonna, try to find, some of the really early explorers didn't realize that there was a big, huge landmass here. And they're like, we're just gonna cross this ocean because we think it's gonna be a quicker route to China to be able to get things like silk and stuff like that. And
well, I wasn't looking for the whole like.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying like there's there's that, and then when they realize, oh, there's this big huge ass chunk of land here, then exactly, in places, in the United Kingdom, they were like, we don't like how the king is pretty much forcing everybody to practice the same religion the same way.
Right.
We're gonna come over here. And then even whenever people got over here, it was different because you had the Pilgrims, but then you had like the Puritans, and you had all these different people. That,
and then there were all of these subgenres of essentially the same religion, because like pretty much all Western religion is based on the same thing. They just call it something different,
right?
And then practice it a different way, because you have the so for instance like Catholicism, and then like Christianity, and then Puritans and Quakers and evangelicals and Baptist and the Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday people, and I don't know, our Lutheran Saints of Jebediah, and the I don't know, clearly I don't know, but we've never been a Christian nation.
I agree.
We have never been a Christian nation. America has always been a nation that really practices for religious freedom. And all of this, like, oh, well, we do this for the sake of Christianity, or I do this because I'm a Christian. And I'm like, no, you do not know what Christianity is. You are using the word Christianity as an excuse to be hateful to people. There is an ad I keep seeing on Hulu, because it's the only platform I'm using right now. And it basically just says, Jesus would have loved the people that you hate.
It's true.
Because that's the true Christian way.
Yeah, and I mean, always it says in there, love thy neighbor, and there was no exceptions. It wasn't love thy neighbor
unless they don't agree with you.
Yeah, unless they don't agree with you. Love thy neighbor unless they believe in different things than you do.
Yeah.
There was no unless.
Right.
It was love thy neighbor.
There were no
love
stipulations. There were no exceptions. It was always my understanding that the Christian practice was based in love. Very much treat others the way that you want to be treated. I don't give a shit about stripping you of your basic human rights. Why do you give a shit about doing the same to me? It's all about control. It's a mask. We want a utilitarian government, but we're going to mask it and call it Christianity, because a good majority of white Americans identify themselves as Christian in some form or fashion. Yeah. And it's just it's disgusting. It's bullocks. Yeah. Wow, we went deep into politics.
So basically, going back to, I think, how this started, being a former teacher myself, and again, even being of the, identifying as a Christian myself, the Bible does not belong in the classroom. It doesn't, because then also I think they're having blinders on to some instances, like, oh, we're going to post all this Christian stuff, and we're going to have the 10 Commandments and things like that. And yes, I can understand where there's good bases for that, because the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie. Those are basically almost kind of like common sense things.
Thou shalt not worship false idols. Trumpers. I said it.
And those are just kind of like basic, like I said, common decency rules, for society.
Yeah, that's common. That's street. The Bible got street smarts, y'all.
But
don't kill. Don't lie.
But at the
don't sleep with somebody else's wife.
Unless
she's a consenting adult.
Yeah, unless you guys have some kind of consent, and that's an arrangement that you have made, and there's consent from all parties. But again, that does not belong in a classroom. It doesn't belong in a high school classroom. It doesn't belong in a middle school classroom. It does not belong in an elementary school classroom. It does not belong in the classroom, period. Because also, I think one thing that people are not keeping in mind is that it opens the doors for everything. Because yes, if we're going to teach religion, we need to teach all religions, not only just Christianity.
Yeah, and that is very much a collegiate course.
Very much. That's the course that I took whenever I was in college.
World religion? Absolutely.
Religions.
Because here's the thing. Because America is not now, nor has it ever been, specifically a Christian nation. If you're going to start teaching religion in public school and you're going to have the Bible, you got to have the Quran.
Yep.
All right? You got to have the
Torah.
Torah. Thank you. You can't just cherry pick it because politically you're just trying to appeal to white people. And that's, I mean, when it comes down to it, I think that's what it really is. You know, it's a lot of fear mongering. It's a lot of,
and I mean,
yeah.
If have your beliefs, you know, I feel like that
celebrate your beliefs. Be proud of your beliefs.
Yes, but it's something again that needs to be, you know, just like how a group of people out there will be like, well, don't, you know, put your particular whatever agenda in my face. Well, you know, having a Bible in school and expecting teachers to teach from the Bible, you're basically, you know, putting a Christian agenda in the faces of those children.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, if that's something you want to teach at home, by all means, you know, please teach, you know, from your religious text of choice at home. If that's something that you want to go to a worship service once, twice,
absolutely.
3 times a week, that is your choice. There's specific buildings, you know, and establishments for that.
Absolutely.
But
yeah, and not to mention, there are Catholic schools.
Yeah, and exactly. There are private schools. If you want to send your child to a specific Christian, Catholic, private school, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, you can f***ing do that.
Absolutely.
But if it's a public school, you're already going to get the bare minimum.
Unfortunately.
Reading, writing, arithmetic. All right, you're already going to get the bare minimum. We're not bringing religion into this. That is just
absolutely not. The only thing I could say in my personal opinion is I think, you know, world religions, yes, is a collegiate course, but I think that something kind of like an intro to world religions maybe could be an elective in like a high school setting.
Yeah.
You know, just like how also, in my personal opinion, we don't have it here in Oklahoma, but I think that there should be a specific sexual education class.
Ah!
Not just an assembly at the beginning or the end of the school year that be like, okay, here's the female anatomy and here's the male anatomy.
You know,
and like it needs to be a sexual health class,
a real course with exams and flashcards or whatever, diagrams, which is why I am going to be doing a whole new thing specifically on the social medias that will be educate, because the one thing I said, you don't want me molding minds of young children. So when those minds turn into adults and they don't have all the right information, that's when I'm coming in.
And
because it baffles me how full grown adults don't have a clear understanding about how their own bodies work. They don't have a clear understanding of what parts of their body are actually called. And so they just don't have proper information. So I'm going to be giving that information.
And, you know, there, especially here in Oklahoma and in the Bible Belt, there are a lot of people with like, well, I don't want my children learning about sex. You know, I cannot speak for every single elementary out there in Oklahoma or in the nation or anything, but I can tell you I was never talking about anything sexual or anything like that to any of my former students. And the only thing, especially on elementary level, that was ever discussed, and this was something that parents had to fill out a permission slip for. Like, you know, the children were not required to go to it. You know, in 5th grade, now I know sometimes elementary, depending on when you are, might include a 6th grade or something like that, but the elementaries that I was at, elementary was at 5th grade, ended at 5th grade. The parents sent home a permission, and it was basically kind of like just a health thing, and it was mainly to talk about the changing of the body. It was discussed, so that way some of the girls who hadn't already experienced it, for instance, they go to the bathroom one day and they wipe and there's blood on the toilet paper, that they don't lose their shit and they don't freak out, and so that way they at least have some basic knowledge about, this is probably going to be coming sooner rather than later, and
and I think if we stopped calling it sexual education, I think it would scare less people, because I think the word sex is what scares these really dumbass parents in the first place.
Right.
And because they're like, I don't want my child learning about sex. We're not teaching about intercourse. We're not teaching about penetration.
No.
We're not teaching about positions.
No.
We're not teaching about orgasms. But sex is the term used to describe genitalia.
Agreed.
And so if it was just called health class, and a health class, much like math and reading, in my opinion, is something that should be taught in every single grade. And just, you get different stages of it. You're not teaching first graders trigonometry.
Absolutely not.
No, you have to work your way up into it. But I remember only having 2 health classes while I was in school. Mm-hmm. And that was even when I was in college. When I went to university, I only had 3 health classes. The first one was in the 6th grade or the 7th grade, and it was like it talked about everything from, these are the types of foods that you should be eating and why. These are the types of nutrients that you get from these foods and what they do for you. This is why sleeping enough works, is so important. This is why the difference between stamina and strength and all this other stuff. And then by the time we got to reproductive health, my teacher did the most brilliant thing in the world. And he was a very respected track coach. He said, okay, everybody turn to chapter 13. And he said, we're going to do this once and only once. I want everybody to repeat after me. And he said, penis, penis, penis. And all the kids said, penis, penis, penis. And he's like, okay, vagina, vagina, vagina. And all of the kids said, vagina, vagina, vagina. And he's like, all right, you have about 3 minutes to get all of your jokes and giggles out. And once those 3 minutes end, if I hear any jokes or any laughing afterwards, you get kicked out of class. You get kicked out of class more than once, you get sent to the principal's office. You get sent to the principal's office and you're kicked out of my class and you have an F and you have to repeat it next year. And you're going to have to explain to all of your little friends how you're not mature enough to handle this. One kid did end up getting kicked out. I don't think he ever went to the principal's office. And it's because he was like, we gotta look at that. And he was like, hey, out. Like, he was not messing around. And I learned the most from this teacher about health and sexual health and reproductive health than I did any other teacher. Because by the time I got to high school, first of all, same book. That's embarrassing. By the time we got, and this teacher was very religious and he was very, okay, we're going to talk about drugs and alcohol. And he's like, as far as I'm concerned, if you're doing drugs, you're a sinner. And if you're drinking alcohol, you're a sinner. I've never had so much as a Tylenol my whole life, and I've never had a drop of liquor. And we're like, okay, but how does it affect us health-wise? I don't want your opinion. How does it affect us health-wise? By the time we got to chapter 13, again, same book.
These were 2 different teachers, though, right?
And 2 different teachers.
In 2 different states.
3 years apart.
2
different states, 3 years apart. Same book. And he's like, all right, I want you to read this chapter. On Friday, we'll have a test, and no one ask me any questions. And we're all kind of looking around like, you don't have anything to say about how you're a better person than all of us, because when we have a headache, we take Tylenol, and when you have a headache, you just pray for it to go away or whatever. And I stood up, and I'm like, that's not teaching. And I'm like, kids learn in different ways, which is why we don't just read and then take a test on Friday.
Yeah.
You know,
That's not teaching.
Also, if you're trusting us to read, we're not going to read shit. We might as well just skip this chapter if you're not man enough to teach it. So I'm a rebellious little shit, especially when I was in high school. So I stood up and I was like, why aren't you teaching us this lesson? And I don't remember what he said, but I was like, are you afraid to teach this? And of course that probably made him mad because now I've emasculated him. And I'm like, you're afraid to say these words. And I'm like, let's try something. Everyone repeat after me. Penis, penis, penis. And ooh, he was infuriated. And I'm like, okay, vagina, vagina, vagina. And that's when he told me to get out. And I went to the principal's office, and the principal was like, so I understand you're here because you were saying dirty words in class. And I'm like,
penis and vagina is not a dirty word. Yeah, it's a body part.
Exactly. And I said, penis and vagina are medical terminology that are in a high school, or that are in a textbook being taught to high school children. And the teacher that you hired to teach this health class is too afraid to say them. And I'm like, so if he won't say them, I will. If I have to teach this to these children myself, since I've already had this lesson, I'll do it. And he's like, why don't you just hang out with me for the next week?
And thing is that, you know, I do agree with you that a lot of these health classes and, you know, and everything that they are, you know, they're teaching about the anatomy itself. They're teaching about, you know, like these are the different sex organs, you know, and things like that. But also for me, maybe in high school only, there should be an elective, not something required, you know, but an elective that does teach about sex, you know, teaches about things like intercourse and things along those lines, in my opinion.
That gets real taboo, though.
It does, but again, that's why also it's an elective, because you have so many people that, you know, not only do they not know about their own health, they don't know how some common things work. And I mean, when I say sex ed, I don't know, I guess maybe I'm stating it wrong, you know, but I feel like sex ed, they do need to teach about, like, okay, so sexual intercourse is when a penis is inserted into a vagina.
See, that's objective. That's objective, because now you're excluding homosexual people and transsexual people and asexual people, which is why I'm like, I don't, teaching health, basic human anatomy, basic stuff like that absolutely needs to be taught in the school. But once we get outside of just teaching about that, and now we're getting into sexual lifestyle, I don't agree that should be taught in public schools.
Well, and I mean, I can understand what you're saying, and I
which is why it's a very common and very popular collegiate course.
Yeah, and I feel like that, you know,
because now you're getting into sociology.
Well, for me, I feel like personally, you know, there are so many people out there, and, you know, kids, they get experimental in high school. You know, they're really, you know, their hormones are definitely raging, and they're dating. And, you know, you have girls that are, you know, or people that have the female anatomy that are getting pregnant, and they're like, oh, I don't know what happened. I don't know how this happened. Or you have things like herpes and things like that spreading like rampant, and they have no idea.
So that is not part of sexuality. That is part of health.
Right, and
that is absolutely, because all a part of, so anytime they talk about reproductive health, like generally they just go through like the gestation period and meiosis and mitosis and how pregnancy happens, the different stages of pregnancy and childbirth and yada yada yada. They are not teaching about preventative measures, which is still pretty taboo. If I can imagine why a lot of parents would be like, I don't want you teaching about condoms and contraceptives because our religion teaches us to be abstinent, or our religion doesn't believe in that, because like evidently that's still very, very prominent. But because that is, but the knowledge needs to be there. Even if it's still, like, for instance, in order for me to get my driver's license, I had to take a driving class.
Right.
I was not offered a driving class at school. I had to pay to take a driving class.
Same.
in order to properly pass driver's ed and get my permit and drive. And now I'm an exceptional driver, haven't killed anybody once. But for instance, like Planned Parenthood, as an example, should be, and they probably do, offering these courses, or libraries, the YMCA, any kind of community outreach program that will teach this to students, that will teach this to people who want this information and they otherwise can't get it. Because it does get really weird. There is absolutely a gray area with, I don't want this to be taught to my child. You know, teaching your child about basic anatomy is necessary. There are full-grown women who still don't know what a vulva is. That, and they don't know the location of their clitoris in relation to their urethra and relation to their vagina. That is terrifying. That is terrifying. And meanwhile, we're like, we'll teach everybody about dick and balls all day, but when it comes to the vulva, like, they're just completely bypassing it. They're like, yep, and then here's the uterus and fallopian tubes. All right. But here's the vas deferens and the urethra and the epididymis, and, you know, like, y'all suck. But I mean, it needs to be taught, absolutely. And I'm the type of person that would love to teach that.
Right. And I think whenever, you know, like you said, it maybe instead of being sex ed, being basic health, I just feel like there needs to be, and again, an elective, not something required at all, an elective that, you know, really goes into making sure people are informed. Because again, you know, for me, I feel like I don't want to call it fear mongering, but like I went into that one sexual assembly,
the senior
slideshow, and now I think they luckily do it to freshmen.
You know why? Because the teen pregnancy skyrocketed.
Pregnancy and STDs. But I feel like that what it was is that, you know, they would show pictures of a vagina or a vulva and a penis that was covered in like warts and herpes, or that was like had, you know, weird discharge. And
it was
they'd
basically
be like,
just the STI assembly.
Yeah, and it would be, you know, like, if you have sex, this is going to happen. And I feel like if there was a class that really, you know, broke it down, you know, not necessarily fear-mongering, but I don't know exactly how to describe it. Just something like, these are some things that could possibly happen. And I do think that they, you know, again, in this elective, that they should teach about, here are some proper, you know, contraceptive options that can prevent, you know, help prevent the spreading of diseases. And, you know, prevent getting pregnant. And here are, you know, and teach about things like different kinds of contraceptives, so that way they know the options, you know, besides just, you know, a condom. There's more than just condoms. I mean, obviously there's the pill, but then they have things like they have the shot. And again, these are things that also, you know, for people. So,
well, now we're getting into the field of what a doctor should be preaching versus what a public school teacher should be teaching.
And that's exactly what I was about to say, is I know these are all things that you could be talked about with your doctor. I just think, I don't know, I feel like maybe instead of going into depth with it, be like, here is a list, you know, of different contraceptive options that there are.
I would never disagree with you about the fact that it needs to be taught, and it does need to be taught to teenagers.
An elective.
I cannot say that enough. I can absolutely see where there would be a fight where it's like, if parents would say, because I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, because I want you to know I am very passionate about getting the correct information and education to the right people. But so much so that, you know, when people say like, well, if money wasn't an option, if money wasn't a factor, what would you be doing for the rest of your life? I would love to be teaching teenagers about proper sexual education. I would love to do that. I would go from school to school, town to town, just teaching away, because I love giving people this information, because it shocks me how so few people have it. But I could, again, playing devil's advocate, I can absolutely see where parents would be worried about, well, I don't want somebody giving my child this information, because then my child is going to think, oh, well, now I know how to avoid it, so now I can go have sex.
Then don't enroll in the class. That's why I say an elective.
Right.
You know, just like how when I was in high school, I did not take a single art class because I was not interested in drawing. You know, I knew I wasn't good at drawing. It wasn't something that was a passion of mine.
Yeah.
I didn't enroll in art class. I did things like I did choir and drama because those are things that I was passionate about and I loved. And, you know, I did other classes. Yeah, I took like a gym class and things like that, because at least one gym class I understand is required, you know, and I think at least a general health is required. I think like at least one in your 4 years in a high school. But things like a sex ed class, just
and hold on. It would be a sexuality class.
I mean, and I think that's why they call it sex ed.
Well, and frankly, they should probably start thinking about taking sex out of it. But it is sexual education is much too broad, you know, because for instance, when I was in an anatomy class, we didn't start going into infectious diseases. It was, here's your liver and here's how it works and here's what it does and here's what happens if you don't have one. So that's why it's important to have one. So take care of your liver. But we didn't go into like, these are the infectious diseases that can that can cause liver failure or liver damage, or why you would need a liver transplant, because that's going into the medical field and that's going into
True.
Specifics that you would take in college. You don't learn that shit in high school. So as part of sexual education, absolutely, it's the physiology of it. It's the anatomy of it. Where is it and what's it called? The physiology of it. How does it work and how does it relate to the other parts of the body? But once we start getting into physical sex, that's where things get really. It's no longer black and white, because
you're right. That is true.
Because, for instance, you have to take into consideration sexuality. And when I was 16, I knew I liked girls. I didn't know I liked boys. When I was 16, I was very much hidden away into myself. You know, when I was 16, I was not thinking about having sex with other people. You know, when I was 16, the thought of having anything done to me by anybody, I was like, no thanks. For the longest time, I was convinced that I was asexual, because I found sex to be very grotesque. And a lot of that has to do with some childhood trauma. And so that's why it is so sensitive. You know, that's why it's not, yes, the children, the teenagers, they need this information before it's too late. And chances are they need it by the time they're freshmen, because if they get it by the time they're seniors, or if they get it by the time they're in college, it's too late. And they either have an STI that they have to live with for the rest of their life, or they have an STI where the effects they have to live with for the rest of their life, or they've become pregnant. So instead of teaching any kind of sexuality, part of the reproductive education, they do need to start incorporating not necessarily infectious disease, not this is herpes and this is what it looks like and this is how you get it, but definitely talking about protection.
Yeah. And I mean, you're right. I do agree with you. I just feel that right now that there is such a lack, you know, and children are graduating high school and going out into this adult world not having the proper knowledge,
Yeah.
and it's hitting them like a ton of bricks.
And that's not anything new. Like your mother, my mother, they didn't get this education. They didn't get this education. They didn't, you know, I and it is my mission in life. Every woman I meet, I want them to know what the vulva is. I have a friend that I went to college with, and she introduced me as, and this is my friend Jenn, she taught me what the vulva is. Because for the longest time, I was like, I have this information. Why don't my friends have this information? And it's because we went to different schools. And it's because we got a different education. And also, what the is that all about? Why is it that, so I started school in Oklahoma and then divorced parents. So moved to Wisconsin, 7th grade. And I was 2 years behind in math. I went from being an A student in math. Got it. Long division, easy. Decimals, easy. Compound fractions, easy. I got this. Yo, math is easy. Ooh, ooh. Moved to Wisconsin. Math class in 7th grade. They were talking about something, and I was like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And they all had graphing calculators, and I'm like, I have this one from Texas Instruments. It's the tiny one. And they're like, no, you need a graphing one. And I'm like, what's a graph? Is that like mean, medium, mode, range? Because I'm a whiz at that. I don't need a graphing calculator to do that. I never had a graphing calculator my whole life. But I was like, why is it that you're in 7th grade and I'm in 7th grade, but I'm 2 years behind in math? Can we please even the playing field?
I would agree with that.
I can understand teaching, like, evidently students in Wisconsin get like a brief history of Canada, and they learn all about the provinces of Canada. Did you ever learn that in school?
No.
No, because Oklahoma's nowhere near Canada. But you know what we got? Oklahoma history.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Which was fascinating. I loved learning about Oklahoma history. And then I think we touched a little bit in like the different states of Mexico. Because we're much closer to Mexico than we ever will be. So the first time as an adult, somebody was like, can you name the 5 provinces of Canada? I was like, they have provinces? And they were like, oh yeah, Quebec and I can't name a single one. Oh, Alberta? And I'm like, why do you guys know this? And they're like, you didn't learn this? I'm like, no, I grew up in a state nowhere near Canada. So I can kind of understand geographically learning a little bit different stuff about your state history, learning a little bit different stuff about maybe geography, but in no way, shape, or form should math, should science, should literature differ.
I would agree with that. I would agree, because the fact, like you said, the fact that you could move just a couple of states away and then it's just completely, like you said, being 2 grades behind, you know, because no.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. Is your husband worried about you yet?
That's kind of something I was wondering. I'm surprised my phone's not dead. Well, it's at 4%. And I keep thinking, I was like, I probably should go home to my husband, because at this point, we're definitely probably not going to be going to Tulsa. Or if he has gone to Tulsa, he has gone to Tulsa without me. Let's see. Let me check his location. Let me see where he's at.
Well,
no, he's still at home.
I appreciate all of you for joining us today on our multiple rants. This is my best friend, Rachel. And we'll see you next time. Hi, I'm Jenn. So your first podcast, how'd it feel?
It felt good. I felt like this is something that would have to be broken up into a lot of different, because with all the content from last night and then this morning.
This is going to be like 2 separate episodes and then a million different shorts.
Yeah.
Yeah.